Of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, only the pyramids of Giza in Egypt have survived to this day. The pyramid of Cheops is striking not only by virtue of its incredible size, but also because of the exactness of its proportions. It is a masterpiece which stands comparison with much of what even modern architects are capable of. But the pyramids were erected by people who had no powered machinery and whose chief measuring devices were sticks and ropes. It takes a lot of experience to build a pyramid. In fact, the builders needed more than 100 years to get the shape just right. Previously, princes and kings had been entombed in simple structures made of clay bricks, known as mastabas. These are not much more than rectangular chambers lined with wood. The first pyramid was built on the orders of Pharaoh Djoser in Saqqara. It could be described as a series of mastabas, one on top of the other, each smaller than the one below. The pyramid of Saqqara rises in 6 steps to a height of 60 meters and is the only one whose grand plan is not square. The wisdom of its architect Imhotep was legendary. He was honored as a brilliant astronomer and as the father of medicine. His design for the pyramid in Saqqara provided the prototype for all the later pyramids in Egypt. When Pharaoh Snefru came to the throne, he kept precisely to Imhotep's plan when he built his own pyramid in Medum. It was designed as a step pyramid, but later the steps were piled with rubble so that even surfaces resulted. It was 92 meters in height and measured 144 meters along each side. Unfortunately, there is little left to see today. Even before it was completed, Snefru gave orders for the construction of 2 more pyramids in Dashur, 40 kilometers to the north of Medum. The first is known today as the bent pyramid, so 2 different angles of slope. It is thought that the top part was made less steep because structural problems came to light while it was being built. The second pyramid in Dashur is known as the Red Pyramid. Its builders seem to have learned from the experience of the bent pyramid because the angle of inclination of its sides was shallower from the outset. This makes it the first really symmetrical pyramid, the culmination of a long period of development. After Snefru's death, his third son, Cheops, came to the throne. He reigned for 23 years and knew how to build the perfect pyramid. For religious reasons, a suitable site had to be found to the west of the Nile, the land of the setting sun. In addition, logistics dictated a site close to the river in order to facilitate the transport of building materials and provisions. Above all, though, a firm, level foundation of rock was needed. All the pyramid sites fulfill these conditions. Cheops decided that the Giza Plateau was ideal. Once the location had been chosen, building could begin. First, the grand plan was sketched out. The Great Pyramid of Giza has the most precise orientation of all the Egyptian pyramids. The average deviation from the cardinal points of the compass is only about 3 minutes of arc. We can only guess as to how the builders achieved this precision. Advocates of the horizon theory believe that a semicircular wall was built. Its height was precisely gauged so that the priest could see nothing but the night sky. In this way, the wall formed an artificial horizon. From the focus of the semicircle, a particular star had to be observed and its rising and setting points marked on the wall. Using a plumb line, the equivalent point at the bottom of the wall was found, and these were joined by straight lines to the centre of the circle. Bisecting the angle thus obtained gives you geographical north. Many scholars assume that this must have been the method the builders used because it would have allowed an exact orientation of the pyramid. The next stage was to lay the foundations. The Giza plateau was not quite level, and levelling this site was a real feat of civil engineering. The maximum deviation from the horizontal is just 2.1 centimetres. According to one theory, the site was surrounded by low walls and filled with water. Then, below the surface, a number of channels were chiselled in the rock, all the same distance from the surface. After that, the water could be let out again, and the rock between the channels hacked away until a smooth, level surface was obtained. In the middle, the masons left a rocky core, which would later substantially reduce the volume of the material needed for the pyramid. There was another decisive factor in the choice of this location, namely a virtually inexhaustible supply of the proper stone. About 30 metres to the south of the pyramid, you can still see the remains of the so-called Cheops quarry. Almost 2.8 million cubic metres of stone were quarried here. The material was used not just for the Great Pyramid, but for other buildings on the plateau. The Pyramid of Cheops itself consists of some 2.3 million blocks of stone, each measuring about a cubic metre and weighing 2.5 tons. Since a pyramid was constructed during a pharaoh's lifetime and had to be ready to serve as his tomb on his death, meticulous planning was needed, with a strict division of labour. The workers were not slaves, as was previously thought, but free citizens. Building took place above all during the annual Nile flood, because during this period no work was possible in the fields. The Greek historian Herodotus reports that the pyramid was built in 20 years by 100,000 men. Today it is believed that the number of workers was much smaller. Archaeological finds have revealed that the stones were transported on special slides. Thick wooden planks were set in the ground and moistened to reduce friction. This allowed large blocks to be moved on sleds by a small team. Experiments have shown that the stones would have been shifted most efficiently by groups of 6 to 8 men. Using this figure as a guide, we can estimate that about 3,500 workers were busy at any one time. The content of nearby graves suggests that a further 20,000 men were employed, delivering materials and provisions to the site. Herodotus also reports that machines were used for the building process, but pulleys and derricks would seem to be too slow and inefficient. Probably ramps were used instead. These could have taken various forms. The straight ramp. Its gradient mustn't exceed 10 degrees, or else the workers won't be able to haul up the load. But since it would eventually have to reach the summit of the pyramid, it would have to be constantly extended. The resulting problems of statics make this theory unlikely. Another possibility is a helix. It would have coiled around the whole pyramid. The internal ramp would have used less material, but the gradient inside would have been very steep. Of course, the different forms may have been combined. There's a new theory that says the stones were lifted directly onto the pyramid by means of portable winches. Drag marks give some support to this idea. It's also possible that winches were used in combination with ramps in order to facilitate access to higher levels. The final problem concerned the pinnacle stone, or pyramidion. It had to be lifted to the summit. Together with the ramps, it seems that a heavy counterweight was needed to achieve this. Finally, there stood on the Giza Plateau a unique edifice almost 150 meters high. This made the Pyramid of Cheops for a long time the world's tallest building, until the spires of Cologne Cathedral, some 10 meters taller, overtook it in the 19th century. The pyramid's geometric properties are remarkable. Its ground plan is virtually an exact square, measuring 230 meters along each side. The circumference of the pyramid equals its height multiplied by 2 pi, the same as the ratio of the circumference of a circle to its radius. Before the pyramid was sealed for all eternity, it could be entered by an opening in its northern side. This leads via downward gradient directly to a chamber beneath the surface of the rocky plateau. It is not clear if this was ever intended to be Cheops' last resting place. The passage is far too narrow for a sarcophagus. Another room is known as the Queen's Chamber. It lies exactly on the central east-west axis and has limestone walls and ceiling. Proceeding further, one comes to the Great Gallery, a passage 46 meters in length and more than 8 meters high. At the end of the Great Gallery is the Holy of Holies, the King's Chamber, clad in red granite. Close to the west wall stands an open rectangular sarcophagus. The ceiling consists of slabs of stone weighing between 25 and 50 tons. Above are so-called relief chambers, which reduce the pressure on the King's Chamber. It is uncertain whether Pharaoh Cheops was ever entombed in the King's Chamber. But what remains is an edifice of majestic beauty, which still impresses people today. When Cheops' son Khephren came to power, he commissioned a pyramid of his own, next to that of his father. The Khephren pyramid is not quite so tall, but the plateau on which it stands is 10 meters higher, making it look the taller of the two. The third pyramid is that of Menkaure, Khephren successor. This third pyramid was built at a time when the power of the pharaohs was already in decline, and it's only 66 meters tall. It marks a definite break in the history of monumental grave structures. The last king of the 4th dynasty didn't have a pyramid built, but returned to the mastaba system. Even today, many architects are attracted by the pyramid aesthetic. One famous modern example is the 21-meter-tall glass structure above the entrance to the Louvre in Paris. The world's largest modern pyramid is in Las Vegas and houses a hotel and casino. It is based on the Cheops pyramid and at 110 meters is only about 35 meters shorter than the great original. But it provides no real competition for the pyramid in Giza.